Asher and I had been childhood sweethearts for over 10 years and suddenly we got together this year. I asked him why he didn't court me in high school. He said, because I didn't want to have a fruitless relationship with you. I wanted to marry you. I felt so sweet in my heart and posted an official announcement video online. But when I opened the comment section, I was dumbfounded. He didn't court you in high school because he was busy chasing others. It's time for him to get married. After looking around, he found that you have the best conditions. Girl, you're just a backup option. I jokingly showed the comments to Asher. His face suddenly turned livid. Only then did I notice the page on his phone, which was paused on his first love selfie in her WeChat moments, and he had given it a like. 01 In the 15th year of being Asher's childhood sweetheart, he confessed his love to me. We were both 27 years old, at the age when it was time to talk about marriage. In the mirror, both he and I had changed from the youthful look in school uniforms to a mature appearance capable of handling things independently. 6 months after we transitioned from friendship to a romantic relationship, Asher took me home to meet his parents. Our two families had been neighbors for years and were evenly matched, running companies in different industries. It wasn't my first time going to his house, but I was still so nervous that my palms were sweating. I asked, isn't this progress a bit too fast? Asher had a smile on his lips and held my hand. Because you're the woman I want to marry the most. The affectionate gaze under his gold-rimmed glasses made me dizzy. I had secretly loved Asher for 15 years. This secret love was hidden in the dark, just watching him wander among one woman after another, yet there was never a place for me by his side. I wasn't the one beside him, but I was always behind him. Everyone said that Playboy Asher was truly sincere about me this time and that he had really turned over a new leaf. At the old house, Asher's parents were overjoyed and said that they had long regarded me as their future daughter-in-law and hoped we would get married as soon as possible so that our two families could become one. However, even when Asher and I had been in a relationship for almost a year, I still hadn't received Asher's proposal ring. After a night of intimacy, I pestered Asher and asked him a question: why didn't he court me in high school when our feelings were the best at that time? He casually flipped through the company messages on his phone without even looking up. Because I didn't want to have a fruitless relationship with you. I wanted to marry you. It wasn't the first time he had given such an answer, but I was still as happy as a child being coaxed. Asher and I didn't make an official announcement. He said he didn't like attracting attention, and I respected his choice, so in the eyes of most people, he was still single. But at the instigation of my best friend, I posted an official announcement video on Douyin to secretly express my possessiveness. It was a very simple video of just over 10 seconds. I talked about our experience as childhood sweethearts, my history of secret love, and said that Asher only wanted to marry me instead of just dating me, and that I was about to marry him and enter the marriage hall. At the end, I added a small regret: how nice it would have been if he had courted me in high school. I would have definitely said yes right away. In the group photo, Asher turned his face away from the camera, only showing his slightly messy hair and his high, straight nose, while I looked at him with love in my curved eyes. I didn't expect that this video would reach 1 million views in just 2 days. The top comments in the comment section were: he didn't court you in high school because he was busy chasing others. It's time for him to get married. After looking around, he found that you have the best conditions. Sister, you're your boyfriend's backup option. I didn't take it to heart and jokingly showed the comments to Asher, who was sitting on the sofa after coming home from work. He just glanced at them and then snapped the business plan in his hand shut with a pop, his face turning livid. He impatiently tugged at his tie. Don't listen to these people's nonsense all day long. Go do some spa treatments when you have time. But at this time, I noticed that the page on Asher's lit-up phone was paused on a woman's selfie. The woman had fair skin, was lively and charming, and was smiling at the camera, with small dimples showing on both sides of her mouth. Below the photo, he had given it a like. This was the first time I had seen Ava again in 10 years. She was Asher's first love. Asher had pursued her in the 2nd year of high school and they got together. However, due to the huge gap in family backgrounds, Ava and Asher were forcibly separated by Asher's parents when they were about to graduate. I forced a smile. Do you still keep in touch with her? Asher immediately turned off his phone screen. She's the new assistant. Don't overthink it. He reached out and held my somewhat cold hand. I'm about to marry you. Okay. 02 Since Ava came, Asher had gradually become cold towards me. He didn't realize that he still gave me a goodbye kiss before going to work every day as usual, but there was some absent-mindedness in this kiss. I didn't expect to meet Ava under such circumstances. Asher's stomach problem flared up again in the morning. His face was as pale as paper, and he had a severe stomachache. He took an ibuprofen pill and then went to the company. Since he graduated and became the deputy general manager of his family's company, he had been so busy that he didn't eat on time and developed a stomach problem. I cooked yam porridge for him as usual and took it to the company. It was in the parking lot downstairs of the company that I met Asher and Ava. Perhaps they were going out to negotiate business. They walked out of the elevator side by side and walked all the way to Asher's car. He helped Ava with her coat, chatting and laughing, with a bright smile in his eyes, and there was no sign of his stomachache at all. I had never seen Asher be so attentive to a woman before. Ava was bright and charming, while I was quiet and reserved. She was indeed the type that Asher liked more. Seeing me, Asher stopped in his tracks, looking embarrassed. Why did you come out in such cold weather? It was -10 degrees in City A today. The porridge and side dishes in my hands were kept warm in a thermos bucket and were still hot. In contrast, my heart was already colder than ice water. Ava saw me and smiled, taking Asher's arm and greeting me, "Rosalie, long time no see. Why are you here?" I said coldly, "I'm Asher's girlfriend." "Didn't he tell you?" I looked at Asher, but he avoided my gaze. Ava's face froze for a moment. "You're not married yet. Even if you were, you could still get divorced." "What do you mean?" She's clumsy with words. She didn't mean that. Asher stepped in front of her to explain for her. Asher felt sorry for her. Clearly, I hadn't said anything. "You'd better go back first. We'll talk about it when we get home." His tone was cold and distant, and his brows were slightly furrowed. I felt like a clown staying there, and the thermos bucket in my hand was like a hot potato. Bearing Ava's mocking and triumphant gaze, I stuffed the thermos bucket into Asher's hands and said softly, "I cooked this porridge for you. Remember to drink it." Asher was stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't expected that I would brave such a strong wind to bring him food, but he still evaded. "I got it." There was no need for me to stay any longer. I turned around and left. Through the car window, I saw Asher smiling as he lowered his head to coax Ava, while Ava pouted and acted coquettish. The two of them, a handsome man and a beautiful woman, naturally formed an exclusive world that others couldn't enter. Now that I think about it, Asher was indeed different towards Ava. Since Asher's parents broke them up 10 years ago, there had been many women around Asher. On closer inspection, their looks were somewhat similar to Ava's. Now that she had reappeared, Asher had finally got what he wanted, I guess. 03 When Asher came home, he acted as if nothing had happened and didn't say a word. It was only at night that I took my quilt and pillow and went to sleep in the guest room. Only then did Asher remember to explain. He grabbed my sleeve. "There's nothing between me and Ava. It's just a reunion after a long separation." I nodded numbly, and he continued, "It's been 10 years. I've long lost feelings for her. She's just an assistant. I need to take her with me to understand the business and make work more convenient." Seeing that I was busy making the bed and didn't want to listen to him, Asher became angry out of embarrassment. "Think whatever you want. You're being so unreasonable." The door was slammed shut with a loud bang, and Asher went out. My phone kept ringing with notifications constantly popping up. Ava had just added me as a friend and was sending me pictures. She had scraped her knee, and Asher, dressed in a suit, squatted down to apply red lotion for her. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Asher's car, and Asher, who was driving, had a focused side profile. During the break after a meeting, Asher took a nap. He looked peaceful and gentle as he slept with his head on the table. There were dozens of pictures. It turned out that she could do so many things in just 2 short months since she came. At the end, there was a selfie of her hugging the empty blue thermos bucket, smiling with her eyes narrowed. Asher said he wasn't hungry, so he let me eat it. "It's really delicious, sister-in-law. You're such a good cook." I looked at the thermos bucket quietly placed aside and threw it into the trash can. 04 I still slept in a separate room from Asher. It was winter vacation, and all the students in my piano studio had gone home for the spring festival. I took advantage of this time to decorate the piano room, so I didn't meet Asher often, and there were fewer conflicts. After receiving the pictures that day, I sent them to Asher and asked, "Is this what you meant by saying she didn't know anything and you were just being a good boss?" Asher immediately called and sent me WeChat messages, but I didn't answer or look at them. Then the Cold War began. Since we confirmed our relationship, I had gone to Asher's house for dinner every week. But because of the Cold War, I declined for 2 consecutive weeks, saying that I was busy. Sensing something was wrong, Asher's mother called me. After learning about the situation, she comforted me. "Rosalie, you're overthinking it. She's Asher's assistant. Those pictures are easy to get. He just helped her apply some red lotion. Auntie will definitely talk to him properly for you. If you don't like that Ava, I'll tell your uncle to ask the HR department to fire her." After saying a few words, Asher's mother hung up. Looking at the time, it was already 12 o'clock, and Asher hadn't come back yet. Since the Cold War started, he had been coming back very late. I curled up under the quilt and fell asleep. I don't know how long I slept, but I was awakened by a slight noise in a daze. I got up and stepped on the floor barefoot. I saw Asher with his back to me, talking on the phone on the balcony in the living room, with a cigarette between his fingers. He took a puff of the cigarette and said in a deep voice, "Mom, I know. Rosalie is the most suitable marriage partner for me. There's nothing between me and Ava. I know what I'm doing. This sentence was like a bucket of ice water pouring over me in the cold winter, making me extremely sober. Was I really just a good marriage option for him, just as the netizens said? I took a step back and kicked a glass ornament on the floor, making a noise. Asher suddenly turned his head. He saw the pet cat, Xiao-Hei, on the floor behind him. Xiao-Hei blinked its big blue glassy eyes and looked at him. And I hid in the corner of the shadow in the corridor, quietly watching him. 05 Asher breathed a sigh of relief and squatted down to stroke Xiao-Hei's fur. Did I wake you up? Be good, Xiao-Hei. Go to sleep. Xiao-Hei was the cat that Asher raised when he was single and bored. Later, he was too busy with work and asked me to help take care of Xiao-Hei. I asked him why. He smiled and said that a cat should be raised with a girlfriend. Since he didn't have a girlfriend yet, he asked me to take care of it for him first. By now, I had already taken care of Xiao-Hei for a full 5 years. At this time, Asher's phone rang. After patiently listening to the person on the other end, his expression changed. Another nightmare? His voice was extremely gentle. Sweetie, wait for me. I'll be there right away. There was no need to guess. It must be Ava. I had never heard Asher call me sweetie. The door closed as Asher went out, and I completely lost my sleepiness. I sat on the sofa in the living room with the lights off, waiting for him to come back. The night was too dark and long. While waiting, I fell asleep. I dreamed that when I was a teenager, the driver had something urgent to do and didn't come to pick me up after school. I passed by an alley and was blocked and harassed by some hooligans from our school. I was forced into the alley, and fear filled my heart. The hooligans stretched out their greasy hands towards me. Just as I was about to scream, a brick suddenly hit the head of the leader. I opened my eyes and saw Asher, who was in the same class as me. 20 minutes later, the hooligans fled, and Asher had bruises on his face. With his handsome face black and blue, he reached out his hand to me. The summer sun was shining brightly. He reached out his hand to me and showed a brilliant smile. Don't cry, coward. Let me walk you home. Before that, he was just my neighbor and classmate. But after that, Asher became the Asher in my diary. Asher had a rebellious and youthful spirit, and as he grew older, he stood out even more. Besides me, there were many girls who liked him. But he fell in love with Ava. Ava was in the same class as us in high school. Her family was not well off. She had 2 older sisters, a younger brother, a sick mother, and her father was an ordinary worker. Out of pity, sympathy, or something more, Asher showed her unique care. When she had nightmares at night, Asher would get up in the middle of the night to call her and comfort her. When she didn't have money to participate in the group study tour, Asher secretly put money in her desk. They would ride motorcycles to the top of the mountain to enjoy the wind after school and made an appointment to watch the sunrise by the sea on the first day of the summer vacation. Asher asked me to go out and play with them, but I didn't want to be the third wheel, so I refused with a bitter smile and never went. Later, they broke up. Asher's romantic history didn't stop. He often changed girlfriends every 2 months. Every time Asher broke up, he would come to me. I was his first contact when he was drunk, always on call, silently helping him clean up the mess and cooking hangover soup for him. His friends all called me sister-in-law. Whenever this happened, I would be at a loss while Asher just drank and looked at me with a teasing look. Once, after getting drunk, I summoned up the courage to ask Asher, Asher, what do you really think of me? Why don't we give it a try? Asher shook his head and smiled. He said that I wasn't his type. I was too well behaved. Ava dared to drink, skip classes, and even talk back to teachers in class. The first time she got on a motorcycle, she asked Asher to drive faster. I was timid, an honor student every year, and had always listened to my parents and teachers since I was a child. Secretly loving Asher was the bravest thing I had ever done in my life. He wasn't unaware of my feelings. My feelings were like a flame, and a flame can't be covered up. And this flame had been burning in front of him for over 10 years. When we reached the right age, I became his top choice for marriage. We knew each other well. I had a gentle personality, came from a wealthy family, and was a decent piano teacher. On the day Asher confessed his love to me, I was stunned, as if I had been hit by all the stars in the sky, seeing stars and not knowing what to do. I thought that Asher had finally been melted by me and had feelings for me. But I didn't expect that the reason was so simple. I was suitable for marriage. 06 I woke up the next day with aches and pains all over my body. I had actually spent the whole night on the sofa. Looking at the clock on the wall, Asher hadn't come back all night. I called him, and it took almost a minute for someone to answer. Asher's voice was hoarse, with the haziness of just waking up. I asked with difficulty, "You didn't come back all night?" He paused for a while and then said, "There was something urgent at the company. I was dealing with documents." But I clearly heard a woman giggling beside him. I forced back the tears in my eyes and swallowed the bitterness in my throat. "Asher, you said you would propose to me this year. When will you give me the engagement ring? You can't go back on your word." He was at a loss for words and changed the subject. I haven't found a satisfactory style yet. I'll buy it for you when I find one. However, I had clearly seen an engagement ring in his office a few months ago. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep that night after seeing it, imagining that Asher would get down on one knee in a sea of flowers and propose to me the next day. But it didn't happen. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. It was like a stone dropped into the sea, making me wonder if he had lost the ring. Now, he probably didn't want to give it to me anymore. I hung up the phone like a walking corpse. Suddenly, I felt like eating cake. In Asher's senior year of college, he used his first month's salary from his internship at an investment bank to buy me a strawberry cake. He didn't like desserts, while I loved them the most. He just sat there quietly, looking at me with a smile in his eyes as I ate. He couldn't help but ruffle my hair. You're such an adult but still as happy as a child. From now on, I'll buy you a strawberry cake every year on your birthday. I had never lacked these things, but since it was bought by Asher, I cherished it especially. However, he had forgotten that today was my birthday. After buying the cake, I walked aimlessly on the street. This winter was really cold. It was so cold that my hands and feet went numb. I found a corner and crouched down, leaning against the wall and feeling dizzy. Miss? Is it 120? There's someone fainted here. When I woke up again, the doctor was standing in front of my hospital bed. Miss Yen, you fainted due to palpitations caused by extreme emotional fluctuations. What happened to you recently? I had always been a slow person. I didn't expect that the sadness of being betrayed by Asher would first manifest in my body. My chest was filled with unprecedented sadness, which flooded my body like a tsunami. My boyfriend cheated on me. The doctor's eyes were full of sympathy for me. It's not worth being sad for a scumbag. You need to keep your mood calm. Extreme emotional fluctuations will consume your chi and blood. Thank you, doctor. It was kind-hearted passers-by who sent me to the hospital. The doctor said that they called my first contact person, but no one answered. My first contact person was Asher. When we were passionately in love, Asher domineeringly added an A in front of his note name, saying that no matter what happened to me, he would rush to my side at any time. Be sure to call me. I'll be angry if you call others. Asher said this less than a year ago, but now it seemed like a lifetime ago. My fingertips trembled as I dialed the number again, and a mechanical female electronic voice came. Sorry, the user you dialed is temporarily unavailable. Sorry. I put down my phone, feeling extremely stuffy in my chest. What a pity. I was planning to break up with Asher. Breaking up on my birthday was really terrible. 07 I moved out of Asher's house. Xiaohei kept rubbing against my hand and acting coquettish. After I put enough cat food and water for it, I dragged a suitcase and left. I found that I had so few things that they couldn't even fill a suitcase. Most of the things in the room were bought by me for Asher. And the photos, albums, and every little moment between Asher and I were even fewer than the photos of Asher and Ava that Ava sent to me. It was 2 days later when Asher realized that I had left and the house was empty. He called me and asked angrily, "What do you mean? Stop making trouble, okay?" How ridiculous. My boyfriend was indulging in someone else's tenderness and it took him so long to notice his girlfriend's departure. I've told you that there's nothing between me and Ava. You moved out just because of this. Is it necessary? Through the screen, I could imagine his impatient look with furrowed brows. I forced myself to stay calm and said, "Whether there's something between you and her or not, it has nothing to do with me now. Let's break up." Asher burst out laughing. You're really childish and immature. I was just too busy and forgot your birthday. We've been together for so many years. What's a birthday? I'll celebrate it for you next year. My heart ached so much that it was shaking. I saw Ava's WeChat moments. Yesterday was her birthday. Asher gave her a diamond necklace, designer bags, and 999 roses. In the 9-square grid of photos, she covered her mouth shyly, holding a bunch of flowers that almost blocked her in her hands, and snuggled up to Asher whose face was shown. The caption read, "Thank you my dearest first love my beloved." Surrounded by flowers, with candles and colorful lights, he gave her everything that a straight guy like him could think of with great effort. Even he, who had always said that he didn't like taking pictures, smiled brightly at the camera. But for me, there was only a casual forgotten. It turns out that there's really such a big difference between loving and not loving. Asher thought I had given in and asked, "When will you move back?" "I won't go back." Asher thought that I would still come to him to make up in a few days like before and sneered carelessly, "Go ahead and throw your tantrum. Come back when you're no longer angry." The phone was suddenly hung up. I stared blankly at the page showing the end of the call. Only then did I realize that Asher was like the strawberry cake I bought that day, smashed beyond recognition and no longer the same as before. 08 I lived a peaceful life for a month after moving back to my home. When my family asked about Asher and me, I made up an excuse that we broke up because of personality differences and got away with it. Usually, I just supervised the piano room, and my life was quite leisurely. But one day, I suddenly received a call from Asher. After I blocked him, he called me using a new SIM card. "Do you know where my ruby red tie is?" "I can't find it." I said coldly, "I don't know. You should ask your assistant. I'm not your girlfriend anymore." "This is the first time I've heard you talk to me in such a tone, as if realizing that I really wouldn't turn back easily," he added. "You promised to marry me. You said you would always be by my side." Yes, I had confessed my love to Asher before we started dating. Asher's family was not harmonious. Beneath the glamorous appearance, his father was cold, his mother was domineering, and his father even had an illegitimate child raised outside. After all these scars were revealed, I felt so sorry for him that I slowly hugged him and said sincerely and devoutly, "It doesn't matter. I'll never leave you." I had been with Asher for so long that he occupied half of my life. Even if he didn't love me that much or wasn't that passionate, I had never thought of leaving him. "But I heard what you said to your mother that day. You just regarded me as a perfect wife suitable for marriage." Asher didn't expect that. He explained, I didn't mean that. Hearing Asher, who was usually calm, become so flustered, I almost laughed out loud. It was the truth, and he knew that he had no way to defend himself. I used to love Asher so much. Giving up on him and giving up on the relationship of more than 10 years was like cutting off my own flesh. It was extremely painful, but my personality is like this. I won't allow myself to love a rotten man while swallowing my pride. Asher heard the voice of the decorator in my place. He said, "You're in the piano room, right? I'll come to find you." Asher rushed over in a hurry. When he got out of the car, he was in such a rush that his tie was crooked. I was sitting on a chair in the unfinished part of the piano room. When he arrived, this was the scene he saw. I was wearing a white dress, sitting on the bench, holding a bouquet of white roses in full bloom with dewdrops on them in my arms. The red roses in his hand, which were prepared in a hurry, had a few petals missing, looking rather shabby in comparison. Asher, who was usually calm and composed, panicked for the first time. He asked me in a hoarse voice, "Who gave them to you?" I lowered my head and arranged the white roses in my hand. "He's coming to pick me up soon." Beep, beep, the car horn sounded twice. Outside the glass door, a car stopped. I smiled and walked out of the door. Asher, who chased after me, grabbed my arm. "Asher, don't keep pestering me after we broke up." Max, who got out of the car, was as gentle as jade, elegant and a gentleman. He opened the door for me politely. Seeing him, Asher's face became even more complicated, and his eyes were full of shock. "It's you?" Max was our high school classmate. He had pursued me for 3 months before, but because I had Asher in my heart, I rejected him. I didn't want to look at Asher anymore and got into the car directly. Asher quickly caught up with me. He lost his composure and slapped the car door hard. "Rosalie, Rosalie. Get out of the car." Max ignored him and just left him in a cloud of car exhaust. The car drove away quickly. I saw Asher's dejected figure in the rearview window, and the bouquet of roses in his hand fell to the ground. The car was driving smoothly. I smiled bitterly and said, "Sorry for using you." "It's okay," Max smiled at the corner of his mouth. "I'm willing to do it as long as you want." 09 Max invited me to visit his company. Only then did I know that the company he founded had settled in City A 2 years ago, and it was near Asher's company. After Max finished work, he invited me to have dinner together at a newly opened restaurant downstairs. After we were seated, the waiter brought 2 glasses of water and handed us the menu to take our orders. I'd like pan-fried salmon, creamy pumpkin soup, and 4-season salad. Before I could say anything, I heard a familiar coquettish voice behind me. "Honey, what about you?" "I'll have the same as you. I don't have much of an appetite." This male voice was undoubtedly Asher's. The world is really small. I looked at Max, and he gave me a reassuring look. He said gently, "Rosalie, what would you like to eat?" Suddenly, there was the sound of a cup breaking behind us. At the same time, Ava screamed. "Rosalie, why are you having dinner with him?" Asher strode over, looking at me and Max sitting together with extremely gloomy eyes. I lazily raised my head and glanced at him. I saw his chest heaving and he seemed really angry. I asked in confusion, "What's wrong with me having dinner with Max?" "I haven't agreed to break up with you yet." "You're cheating." I looked behind Asher. Ava was splashed by the water he knocked over and looked rather embarrassed. I asked, "What about her?" Asher's face was ugly. "I still have some work matters to discuss with her." Ava's face was extremely pale. I chuckled and held Max's arm. "That's good. Don't disturb me and my boyfriend having dinner." In the middle of the night, I received a call from Asher. He seemed drunk, talking incoherently. "Rosalie come becque. I do like you. I'm not without sincerity towards you. It's just that we've been together for too long and I'm a bit confused about the future. I don't know how I made mistakes. Come back to me and I'll live a good life with you." We had known each other for 15 years. If I had heard these words before Asher betrayed me, I would have been very happy. Before this, I had hoped so much that he could directly express his love for me, even just a little bit. That's why I humbly pestered him again and again to confirm his feelings for me. You didn't want to take pictures with me, but you could take pictures with Ava. You didn't want to make an official announcement about me, but you were willing to show your love for Ava ostentatiously on her birthday. You didn't answer my calls, but when Ava had nightmares in the middle of the night and called for you, you rushed to accompany her immediately. Do you know? The call I made on my birthday was from the hospital after I fainted. But you were busy preparing gifts for Ava at that time. I would never forget that Asher chased after me to explain that there was nothing between him and Ava, but his shirt smelled of Ava's perfume. I would never forget that I fainted in the ice and snow while holding a cake, and when I woke up in the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and sympathy in her eyes. I couldn't forget that I tossed and turned in the middle of the night, looking at the photos that Ava deliberately sent to me in her WeChat moments one by one. Looking at my boyfriend, my future husband, smiling brightly in those photos. Asher was at a loss for words. After a long while, he choked and said, "But you said it before. We've known each other for 15 years, and we should continue to be together for another 50 years, grow old together, and never be apart. You said you would never leave me." I smiled faintly. "Sorry, please find someone else to be your wife. I don't want to waste my youth on you anymore." 10 in the evening, the phone rang. I answered the unknown number and found that there was an unusually noisy sound on the other end of the line. It was the noise from a bar. Jason, Asher's subordinate, told me that Asher had stomach bleeding from drinking while discussing business performance and that an ambulance had already been called. He insisted on calling his first contact person, which was me. I said indifferently, "For stomach bleeding, call 120. What's the use of calling me?" The phone was then taken by someone else. Ava screeched at me, "Just come when you're called. Otherwise, if anything happens to Asher, it'll be on your head. Aren't you his girlfriend? Just accompany him." Ava forced out a sentence from her throat, "Asher won't let me accompany him." I guessed that even without me, Asher wouldn't truly love her. Maybe the Asher from 10 years ago could, but the Asher 10 years later couldn't. "What are you blabbering to Rosalie again?" Asher snatched the phone and kept shouting, "Rosalie, I can't live without you. I know I'm wrong. I really regret it." By the end, his sobbing was obvious. I was very calm as still water. On the other end, Ava must have been very embarrassed. I heard her curse Asher as a bastard and then stomp her high heels and run away crying. I carefully told Jason how to take care of Asher and then hung up the phone, ignoring Asher's shouts. 11 I had thought that Asher would completely fade out of my life. Unexpectedly, he became even more persistent after this incident. My piano room was finally decorated. Asher knew when my class ended and came to find me. He was holding a bouquet of blooming roses, but he looked as thin as paper and was much haggard and thinner. He stood there and took out a ring from his arms. My heart skipped a beat. He opened it, and inside was a dazzling pear-shaped diamond ring. Asher slowly got down on one knee and looked up at me, saying, "Rosalie, will you marry me?" Looking at the ring in Asher's hand, it was something I had once dreamed of getting. But now, seeing it, I felt very calm inside. I said softly, "Asher, do you know? This isn't the first time I've seen this ring. That day when I asked you when you would propose to me, it was my last attempt to hold on. But you said you hadn't bought it yet." I chuckled lightly. "Even if you give it to me now, I don't want it anymore." Asher's face grew paler and paler. "I don't love you anymore." 12 I really got together with Max. He's a very nice person and has never hidden his love for me. Even on his work WeChat account, he openly announced our relationship in his WeChat moments. I went traveling with him and took countless photos together, and Asher never came to find me again. Our call record stopped 3 months ago. I heard news about him, such as that he drowned his sorrows in alcohol, took stomach medicine while drinking, and was hospitalized several times. His health was almost ruined. His parents called me and asked me to get back together with him. I politely declined. Later, Asher was forcibly taken to work by his mother. Finally, he deliberately messed up a very important business deal and was fired from his position as the deputy general manager of the company by his furious father. Asher's family still didn't give up on getting him married. At this time, Ava came to the door and said that she was pregnant. Asher presented evidence to prove that Ava had an unclear relationship with other people and that the child wasn't his at all. Ava was driven out of Asher's family in a very embarrassing state. After a series of absurd things, his father decided to let the illegitimate child into the family. But Asher seemed not to care at all and left the family without taking anything. At the age of 30, Max proposed to me, and I accepted. We set our wedding date on a very festive day. I put on my bridal dress and was waiting to go on stage when I received a phone call. Asher, whose voice was so hoarse and weathered that I could hardly recognize it, said, "I'm begging you now. Is there still a chance for you to come back?" I asked in confusion, "What's wrong with me having dinner with Max? I haven't agreed to break up with you yet." You're cheating. I looked behind Asher. Ava was splashed by the water he knocked over and looked rather lampe. I asked, what about her? Asher's face was ugly. I still have some work matters to discuss with her. Ava's face was extremely pale. I chuckled and held Max's arm. That's good. Don't disturb me and my boyfriend having dinner. In the middle of the night, I received a call from Asher. He seemed drunk, talking incoherently. Rosalie, come becca. I do like you. I'm not without sincerity towards you. It's just that we've been together for too long and I'm a bit confused about the future. I don't know. I don't know how I made mistakes. Come back to me, and I'll live a good life with you. We had known each other for 15 years. If I had heard these words before Asher betrayed me, I would have been very happy. Before this, I had hoped so much that he could directly express his love for me, even just a little bit. That's why I humbly pestered him again and again to confirm his feelings for me. You didn't want to take pictures with me, but you could take pictures with Ava. You didn't want to make an official announcement about me, but you were willing to show your love for Ava ostentatiously on her birthday. You didn't answer my calls, but when Ava had nightmares in the middle of the night and called for you, you rushed to accompany her immediately. Do you know? The call I made on my birthday was from the hospital after I fainted. But you were busy preparing gifts for Ava at that time. I would never forget that Asher chased after me to explain that there was nothing between him and Ava, but his shirt smelled of Ava's perfume. I would never forget that I fainted in the ice and snow while holding a cake, and when I woke up in the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and sympathy in her eyes. I couldn't forget that I tossed and turned in the middle of the night, looking at the photos that Ava deliberately sent to me in her WeChat moments one by one. Looking at my boyfriend, my future husband, smiling brightly in those photos. Asher was at a loss for words. After a long while, he choked and said, but you said it before. We've known each other for 15 years, and we should continue to be together for another 50 years, grow old together, and never be apart. You said you would never leave me. I smiled faintly. Sorry, please find someone else to be your wife. I don't want to waste my youth on you anymore. 10 in the evening, the phone rang. I answered the unknown number and found that there was an unusually noisy sound on the other end of the line. It was the noise from a bar. Jason, Asher's subordinate, told me that Asher had stomach bleeding from drinking while discussing business performance, and that an ambulance had already been called. He insisted on calling his first contact person, which was me. I said indifferently, for stomach bleeding, call 120. What's the use of calling me? The phone was then taken by someone else. Ava screeched at me, just come when you're called. Otherwise, if anything happens to Asher, it'll be on your head. Aren't you his girlfriend? Just accompany him. Ava forced out a sentence from her throat, Asher won't let me accompany him. I guessed that even without me, Asher wouldn't truly love her. Maybe the Asher from 10 years ago could, but the Asher 10 years later couldn't. What are you blabbering to Rosalie again? Asher snatched the phone and kept shouting, Rosalie, I can't live without you. I know I'm wrong. I really regret it. By the end, his sobbing was obvious. I was very calm as still water. On the other end, Ava must have been very embarrassed. I heard her curse Asher as a bastard and then stomp her high heels and run away crying. I carefully told Jason how to take care of Asher and then hung up the phone, ignoring Asher's shouts. 11 I had thought that Asher would completely fade out of my life. Unexpectedly, he became even more persistent after this incident. My piano room was finally decorated. Asher knew when my class ended and came to find me. He was holding a bouquet of blooming roses, but he looked as thin as paper and was much haggard and thinner. He stood there and took out a ring from his arms. My heart skipped a beat. He opened it, and inside was a dazzling pear-shaped diamond ring. Asher slowly got down on one knee and looked up at me, saying, Rosalie, will you marry me? Looking at the ring in Asher's hand, it was something I had once dreamed of getting. But now, seeing it, I felt very calm inside. I said softly, Asher, do you know? This isn't the first time I've seen this ring. That day when I asked you when you would propose to me, it was my last attempt to hold on. But you said you hadn't bought it yet. I chuckled lightly. Even if you give it to me now, I don't want it anymore. Asher's face grew paler and paler. I don't love you anymore. 12 I really got together with Max. He's a very nice person and has never hidden his love for me. Even on his work WeChat account, he openly announced our relationship in his WeChat moments. I went traveling with him and took countless photos together. And Asher never came to find me again. Our call record stopped 3 months ago. I heard news about him, such as that he drowned his sorrows in alcohol, took stomach medicine while drinking, and was hospitalized several times. His health was almost ruined. His parents called me and asked me to get back together with him. I politely declined. Later, Asher was forcibly taken to work by his mother. Finally, he deliberately messed up a very important business deal and was fired from his position as the deputy general manager of the company by his furious father. Asher's family still didn't give up on getting him married. At this time, Ava came to the door and said that she was pregnant. Asher presented evidence to prove that Ava had an unclear relationship with other people and that the child wasn't his at all. Ava was driven out of Asher's family in a very embarrassing state. After a series of absurd things, his father decided to let the illegitimate child into the family. But Asher seemed not to care at all and left the family without taking anything. At the age of 30, Max proposed to me, and I accepted. We set our wedding date on a very festive day. I put on my bridal dress and was waiting to go on stage when I received a phone call. Asher, whose voice was so hoarse and weathered that I could hardly recognize it, said, "I'm begging you now. Is there still a chance for you to come back?" I didn't answer. Silence was the best answer. After stubbornly waiting for a minute, he smiled bitterly and said, "The ring that I didn't give you in time has finally been given to you by someone else." He seemed to have made a great determination and said with difficulty the last sentence, "I wish you a long and happy marriage together." The phone call ended, and I found that I was in an extremely peaceful mood. The person I once loved deeply to the point of losing myself could no longer stir up my emotions. That year, he lowered his head in the cinema and whispered in my ear, "Shall we try being together?" This year, he wished me and my husband a happy and harmonious marriage. Max, wearing his groom's suit, kissed the back of my hand and said softly, "Let's go, my bride." Saying goodbye to that period of time, I'm about to start my new life. Asher's side story: when Ava was driven out of Asher's family, she looked at me with hatred in her eyes. I sneered and bent down to her who was lying on the ground and said, "Even if the child you're carrying was really mine, you still couldn't enter Asher's family. They only want a daughter-in-law like Rosalie." Ava's eyes were red. "No matter how good she is, didn't you betray her? You and I are the same kind of people. Don't pretend to be affectionate." Ava was right. Neither she nor I were good people. I had been the most rebellious since I was a child. Whatever my parents told me to like, I would do the opposite on purpose. They despised Ava's poor family and thought she was a burden, but I just wanted to be with her, although my liking for her was only 3/10. Until my mother, who had never laid a hand on me before, slapped me. She was so angry at my failure to live up to her expectations. "If you keep on like this, your father's illegitimate child will take over." Only then did I know that my father wasn't the nice guy he seemed to be, and his illegitimate child was only 5 years younger than me. I was the only heir on the surface for my father, but if I didn't strive hard, the company's property would all go to the illegitimate child. For the first time, my rebellious head bowed down. "Okay, I'll break up with her." They said they wouldn't allow me to be lovesick over a woman. Everyone said that my temperament changed a lot after I broke up with Ava. Actually, I didn't love her that much. I drank time and time again. What I drank for was not only the lost love but also the hatred for my family. Whenever this happened, Rosalie would always be around me, busy taking care of me. Before, I wasn't very familiar with her. But after I saved her once, she stuck to me like a shadow. She was a little girl who didn't know how to hide her love, always around me, with budding admiration in her eyes. But when I looked at her a couple of times, she would return to her calm and reserved appearance. Wearing a white dress, she looked very plain. I liked the way she blushed shyly. Under my tacit approval, my friends around me all called her sister-in-law Bouillarto. Her cheeks would turn bright red, like the burning clouds in the sky. Once, after drinking, she thought I was drunk and came close to ask me, "They all call me sister-in-law. I like you. Can we be together?" Well, actually, she really wasn't my type, but she was really cute. That illegitimate child was so annoying and brought me endless pain. While learning to manage the company, I was eager to release my desires on women. There was still a little follower behind me. In her eyes, there was no one but me. But the father who used to play horse riding with me when I was a child belonged to someone else and had another family outside. Would she really never leave me? Because I worked too hard, I got a stomach problem. I lay on the office desk, writhing in pain and feeling dizzy. It was Rosalie who took care of me busily. She sat on a small stool, seriously cooking porridge for me, and the hem of her white dress fell to the ground. A barely noticeable smile curved the corners of my mouth. It would be nice to be with her, I thought. As I grew older, I was fed up with all kinds of worldly wisdom, flattery, and the company of women. Many friends either tried to curry favor with me or gradually lost touch with me. Only Rosalie stayed by my side because of her persistence. Having a meal with her on weekends was a rare comfort for me. Suddenly, I really wanted to do things that couples do with her. I went to the cinema with her to watch a romantic movie. I tried to hold her hand. She lowered her head as if a switch had been touched. Looking at her reddened earlobes, in the darkness, in the corner where the movie screen was flickering, I kissed her soft lips and saw her eyes widen, as if fireworks were blooming in them. How silly. I got together with Rosalie. If other women were like wine, she was like a pot of warm boiled water. I felt very comfortable by her side. I set myself as the first contact in her phone's address book, took her fishing, and watched the aurora together. At that time, I really wanted to be with her and have a good relationship. But later, my parents took the initiative to contact me and asked me to take Rosalie home. I resisted with all my might. They wanted me to marry Rosalie. Get married as soon as possible and add some descendants to our family. Rosalie lowered her head, her cheeks slightly flushed, like a lily with a touch of peach pink at the tip. But suddenly my heart turned cold. Was Rosalie the most satisfactory daughter-in-law for them? Rosalie did have good conditions. She was a match for our family in terms of family background, and getting married to her would also bring great help to the Asher family. I thought about shouldering my responsibility and spending the rest of my life with Rosalie. Did I really love her that much? Could I really be a good husband and a good father? I had second thoughts, but I still listened to my parents and went to buy a ring. A 6-carat pear-shaped diamond. Whether it was the shape or the size, it was something that Rosalie would like. I held it in my hand and looked at it again and again. My marriage to Rosalie was almost a certainty. All that was missing was a diamond ring and a proposal, and she would become my wife. But I just wanted to delay. At this time, my first love appeared. Ava, as charming as a peach, was even more beautiful than 10 years ago. She rushed into my office clumsily. Her clumsy acting indicated her ulterior motives. It didn't matter. I was full of sorrows with nowhere to vent. Rosalie would forgive me. She would never leave me. Indulging in the tenderness, Rosalie still took care of me. Besides feeling guilty, I became fearless because of being loved. The calls from Rosalie were muted by Ava time and time again as she wrapped her arms around my neck and acted coquettish. I'm sorry. I won't dare to do it again next time. I couldn't bear to blame Ava. Until Rosalie told me that she had fainted and been hospitalized and that I had missed her call, I flew into a rage. Later, when my stomach problem recurred, Ava clumsily spilled the medicine all over me. Suddenly, I remembered that although Rosalie seemed gentle in character, she could actually do everything well. I couldn't live without her. I also remembered that she would accompany me on my birthday every year and sing the happy birthday song that my parents had never sung for me. Suddenly, I missed her terribly. I loved her more than I had in the past 15 years, right at that moment. But it seemed that Rosalie really wouldn't love me anymore. There was a new person by her side. Max, our high school classmate, was elegant and had the admiration in his eyes that every man could understand. I had hated him since college and told Rosalie to stay away from him. Only now did I realize that this emotion was jealousy. I was burning with anger. How dare he covet my woman? He did it 10 years ago and he was doing it now. Rosalie had never left me before, and it would be the same this time. I called her to come back, but I found that she was like a kite with its string cut off, no longer responding to me. She didn't respond to me anymore. All my attempts to win her back were in vain. Only then did I clearly see the toughness in her bones. She loved me passionately, and when she left, she was extremely resolute. After that, it was her wedding with that man. That night, I got drunk and had a dream. In the dream, I summoned up the courage and went to the wedding scene. Rosalie, noble and beautiful with her hair in a bun, had a happiness on her face that I had never seen before. I still wanted to give her the ring. She smiled slightly and said, "This ring is for your future wife. I wish you a happy relationship and a long and harmonious marriage." This was wrong. This was completely wrong. How could Rosalie not want me anymore? When I woke up, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. My room was empty. She had left. I asked a friend to take care of Xiaohei. I finally understood that spring had already come long ago, but I was forever left in that winter. In that winter, I lost my love forever.